Hey everybody, Reef Girl here. I was thinking that because my ATO system has been running flawlessly for quite a while now, you guys might be interested in seeing how we have it set up, since it's a little different than what I've seen before. A top priority for me with the ATO, the auto top off, was accessibility. So ultimately, after talking and discussing and doing research and planning, we decided a drawer might be a good idea. That went from being one drawer to an entire cabinet with 3 drawers. And the really cool thing is, my husband built this cabinet. He had never built a cabinet before. This is after doing a lot of research and watching a lot of YouTube videos. And he was able to use the original shipping crate to make parts of these drawers, which I think is really, really cool. And over here is the outside of the cabinet. And you can see the metal brackets there. They were also part of the original shipping crate. You can see there are drawer slides in this cabinet, and before you ask, they're rated for 100 pounds. So my 7.5 gallon ATO container will be no problem to be supported by these slides. When the top is put on here, it's going to be level with the aquarium cabinet. Here you can see various phases we went through to get this put together. And finally, a first coat of paint. Getting it into the room, there was a bit of a problem, but it was easily solved. Before we put any drawers in, we had to make sure all of the hoses and cables were secure so that sliding the drawer in and out wouldn't catch on any hose or any cable and cause problems. The last thing we wanted to do was tear a hose and cause a leak, or tear a cable and cause something even worse. And here it is, all put together and installed. And if anyone recalls from my video about crossing the border to pick up my stuff, check out these cabinet drawer knobs. Humma humma triggerfish. I don't think I'll ever be able to have one in my tank, but I have 8 of these in my fish room. The ATO container is held in place by 2 pieces of wood. One is there at the front and stops it from sliding forward. And then there's a second piece of wood at the back, which stops it from sliding backwards, so it's actually registered into that space. We got this container at Canadian Tire and it holds just over 7 gallons. It's made of polyethylene and the lid has a good tight seal. You can see in the sump here I have the ATO reservoir that was supplied with the tank, and the one that I've chosen to replace it is about twice as large. So this is the very first time I'll be filling the ATO container. You can see there's a convenient place to put the lid while I'm doing this. And first I'll show you how the water is actually supplied to this container. You can see there's a bulkhead drilled through the side, and that clear hose comes up from the basement, from the RODI container, travels through the floor, along the wall, and into the back of the cabinet here. It's clamped in place so that it can't move and so that it slides in and out with the drawer. The other hose, the one that goes to the Tom's Aqua Lifter, exits the container through the back. There's a hole drilled there, and we've wrapped black electrical tape around it on either side of the wall so that it can't accidentally slip out, because that would be a disaster. The other end of the hose has a couple of weights on it to hold it in the bottom of the container. Here in the top drawer are my pump controllers, and the very first one at the front is for RODI water that comes up from the basement. It's plugged into this power bar here. I just need to turn on the switch and wait for the water to start pumping. Okay, there it is. So now we have water. It's time to put the sensors for the ATO into the sump. It's a little hard to see, but on the left glass there, I've set up the sensor. It's held in place with a magnet on the outside. And although we're not using the ATO container that came with the tank for water, we are using it to house the Tom's Aqua Lifter pump. That's the pump that's going to push the water across and into the return chamber. It's hanging on that metal hook over the glass. that black hose comes up and goes across and down into the return chamber where it's clamped on using a suction cup to hold it in place. Now let's see how it works. I've switched the ATO system on using the lighted switch on the power bar inside the cabinet. And now I'll access the controller by pulling out my wonderful nifty sliding panel and turn it on. The lights are flashing, and when they stop flashing, they should stop with only the lower two blue lights on, because that's how I've set the sensor up so that the top sensing mechanism is at the maximum water level. And there we go. It's set up properly. And now we wait until the water level drops and the actual ATO mechanism is deployed and see what happens. Okay folks, it's MacGyver time, because yes indeed we did have a siphon. In spite of all the careful planning, measuring, thinking, researching, the water ended up siphoning out of the ATO container because the hose where it went into the return chamber was too low. So we have these pieces pulled out of our magic box and drawer of stuff, and we're going to fashion something that will allow the hose to travel from the Tom Aqualifter pump across the ceiling of the cabinet and down into the return chamber without a siphon. We have two acrylic tubes, one slightly smaller than the other, and it actually fits inside the bigger one. There's black electrical tape wrapped around to hold the smaller one in place, and then down further, the larger tube is attached to the glass in the return chamber using suction cups. We also had to put some electrical tape around it to stop it from sliding down because it was a little too small for the suction cups. The hose comes across the ceiling of the cabinet and enters that white self-adhesive bracket and then goes down into the small acrylic tube. And yay, it actually works. The hose travels across the ceiling of the cabinet, enters the small acrylic tube, and goes down into it roughly 3 inches. That's far enough to keep it in place, and yet high enough that there will be no chance of a siphon from the ATO container. Thank goodness, I am so sick of siphons. I check the salinity in this tank regularly and it never changes. It is always rock solid at 1.025, which is exactly where I like to keep it.